I'm going to tell you why Wisconsin Badgers football is going to be better in 2025.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badgers fam? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Harings. As always, really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode brought to you by our great friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Today's episode, we are talking about why Badgers football is going to be better in 2025 than it was in 2024, why that Minnesota game coming up is a must-win, and what needs to happen with Max Klesmits going down with injury, who needs to step up. Let's start with the Badgers football, why it's going to be better in 2025 than it was in 2024. This is a topic that we've been talking about for a minute here, and I think people are still missing or maybe not fully seeing some of the statistical reasons why I think this team almost has nowhere to go but up. I know last year was a disappointing year. The bowl streak was over. It was 5-7, but a couple reasons why this thing is going to be better in 2025. I've talked about the coaching changes. I think Jeff Grimes is a big upgrade over Longo. I think stylistically, I think from a fit, this is going back to what has worked at Wisconsin with a bit of a modern flair. It's melding some of what modern football is doing with what Paul Chryst and Brett Bielema and Barry Alvarez found worked at Wisconsin. I think it's going to work really well. It's going to fit the players better. It's going to fit what we can recruit better. The Longo hire and fire, like that was a big mistake. Fickell messed it. That wasn't what he needed to do, but he's made the correction. I think Grimes is going to be really good. But two big reasons why I look at this team, I look at last year's team and I look at this year's team, and I say they almost have to get better. The first is the passing game. We've talked about it, but here's the numbers. Braden Locke was 16th in the conference. 16th in the conference in passer rating. There's 18 teams in the conference. Guess which team was number 10th overall? Maryland. Whose quarterback did Wisconsin just get? Maryland's. Like, they're going to be better at that quarterback spot. And as we saw from Iowa last year, if you just go from really bad in a spot to decent, that Iowa offense went from atrocious to decent. What a difference that made. Going from that combination of Tyler Van Dyke for a couple games to Braden Locke for the rest of the year to Billy Edwards Jr. Having competent quarterback play elevates everything. It changes everything about the team. You get better play from your receivers because you're throwing on time. You're getting the ball out. You're not getting those 3 tip passes a game that Braden Locke had struggles with. You are getting that 3rd and 3 because Billy Edwards Jr. can run. You are giving your defense more time because you're sustaining drives. You're getting better field position because you're sustaining drives. Just having it, you're elevating from, and it's not a knock on Braden Locke or Phil Longo because it wasn't just Braden Locke. It's a combination of a lot of things. It's not. I'm not killing those guys, but I am telling you statistically that was one of the worst passing offenses in Power 4 football. That was one of the worst combinations of OC quarterback passing game that you will find in Power 4 football. And this team still won 5 games with that. This team was still on the precipice of making a bowl, continuing the bowl streak. And 6 wins isn't great, but they were on the precipice of doing that with that passing attack. It's the most important piece on the football field. It's one of the most important pieces in sports. The starting quarterback for your team, it changes everything. And we had a comment from a show the other day, and I think this is true. I think this is true, that I don't think we fully took into context how big it was to lose Tyler Van Dyke in week 3 against Bama, in week 4 against Bama. Sorry. It just changes everything. Not being competent at that spot alters everything. And I'm very confident Billy Edwards Jr. gives you competency at the quarterback spot. And if you have that, again, it plays up for your offensive line. Right? It plays up for your receivers. It plays up for your skill guys. It plays up for your running backs because now there's more of a passing attack that you got to honor. You have to maybe keep a safety a little deeper, or you have to honor the QB run game, which you did not have to do with Braden Locke. That's another part of this. That's a whole element of football that teams did not have to honor when they played us. What did Wisconsin have to do when you played Oregon? I mean, Gabriel killed us on 3rd down. Absolutely killed us on 3rd down with his ability to move the pocket. We win that game if he's not a mobile quarterback. We win that game if they have Braden Locke, and or insert any non-mobile quarterback. We win that game. We didn't have that element last year. What did Penn State do to us when Aller went out? Pribula came in and he diced us up with his legs. Grimes wants to use a mobile quarterback. Now he has one. Billy Edwards is big. He's fast. He's physical. He's tough. He's not a perfect quarterback by any stretch. I think he's just competent. And that's a good thing when you were really bad last year. I think people continue to gloss over this, just how bad it was last year. And going from bad to competent is a huge, huge multiplicative factor at the quarterback spot. It makes a difference for everything. It makes calling a game plan easier. It makes you easier to run the ball. It makes it easier for your defense. Again, like the impact just at that one spot, I think, is going to be tremendous. And again, we were one game from making a bowl game last year with that passing attack, with one of the worst passing attacks in college football. I think it's absolutely better this year. I really do. And I understand that Wisconsin may not have some of the weapons, Ty Felton, for example, that Maryland had, but they have a better offensive line. They just brought Tanner Koziel. I think their running game is going to be good. And I like Vinny Anthony at the edge. I like Hamper coming in at the other edge. A Tretch at the slot. You've had worse receiver spots at Wisconsin. Now you've had better too. You have to continue to get better. But Vinny Anthony is one of the better receivers Wisconsin has had in a couple years. Like, he's a solid deep threat, can run the 9 route. He's elite speed. I think Hamper can augment and play well alongside him on the other side. Tretch in the slot, we know his physical skill set. I just think that alone makes this so much better. It makes it so much more cohesive, especially paired with Jeff Grimes, the new offensive coordinator. It gives me a lot of confidence going into next year that not that this team's going to be great, but again, better. That's my point. This team's going to be better in 2025. The other reason is, and this stat, we've talked about it a couple times, it's still almost unfathomable to me. The Badgers were 134th in tackles for losses last year. That's last in the country. And you think about this Badgers team that has produced Leo Chanel and TJ Watt and JJ Watt and Isaiah Loudermilk and Keanu Benton and Van Ginkel and Zach Bond this year has been incredible in the NFL. You think about this NFL team that is that's an NFL team of disruptive players that the Badgers have sent to the league. Chris Orr and Sam Board, and you can go on, TJ Edwards, you can go on and on and on. This team is last in the country in tackles for loss, not in the Power 4, in all of the country. Dead last, 134th. That's going to get better. And you know why it's going to get better? Because if it doesn't, coaches are going to get fired. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter if Tressel is Luke Fickell's boy or not. You can't not improve on that and keep your job. So I think pressure is a good thing sometimes. I think you're going to have to get better this year. You're going to have to get a little more aggressive because what you did last year didn't work. And you can't put that on paper 2 years in a row. You can't have 2 years in a row where you're the worst defense, literally. Literally the worst defense in college football at this level of college football at creating disruption. You can't have another year like that. So I think that gives me confidence because I don't think Tressel's not dumb. He knows that wasn't good enough. And I like the pieces that they brought in a little bit. I think Reiger is a guy that can add there. I think Suggs is a guy that can add there in terms of disruptive plays. Reiger is the transfer from Louisville. That's a player that had 5 sacks a couple years ago. JVR Suggs was the highest ranked defensive lineman. If you look at PFF in pass rush grade, that he would have been the highest ranked defensive lineman for the Badgers last year, bringing him over from LSU. I like Heiberger as a guy who should hopefully be able to play more, take a step this year. Allegro at the inside linebacker spot is a guy who we know he can create disruption. And I don't want to sell a false hope or a false narrative. We were really high on the outside linebackers last year, but again, it can't be worse. I'm sorry. Like, I know people say, well, it could be. No, it can't be. You were worse last year. They're going to be better next year. I think you get a little better at disruption. I feel better about the cornerback spot with Rico coming back. I like the OC more, and I love the addition of Edwards. I just think it's a solid, competent, tough, Big Ten experienced quarterback that's not going to crap the bed when he sees elite competition because he's faced it, and he's faced it behind a bad offensive line, and he's not going to have that at Wisconsin. I'm sorry. I think Wisconsin's a 7-win team next year, and maybe a variation of plus or minus 1, 6 to 8 wins. I think that's what they are next year. Call me too optimistic, call me crazy, but this was a 5-win team with one of the worst quarterbacks and a defense that couldn't make a tackle behind the line of scrimmage last year, and they won 5 with an incredibly tough schedule last year. So it's you have basically the same type of schedule next year as you had last year. Both are meat grinders, and you won 5 last year. There's no reason why this team with better quarterback play isn't going to win 6, 7, 8 next year. Call me crazy. That's where I'm at. Coming up next, we're going to talk about why the Minnesota game is a must win for Wisconsin Badgers basketball. But first, a quick second and a quick break for our friends of the show over at Rocket Money. Rocket Money helps you find subscriptions that you forgot about or that you're paying for twice. It is a personal finance app. It's something that has helped me tremendously. I've had several subscriptions that Rocket Money has helped with. Rocket Money brings everything together, monitors your spending, helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings, like I said, all those little pieces together into one spot, which is super helpful for people like me. Otherwise, I get kind of sidetracked and lost in the lost in the sauce of it. Put everything on one dashboard and let me cook. That's what Rocket Money does. Saves up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. And for me, again, one of the best features is just being able to see it all in one spot. Because otherwise, I get too confused with this login's that, this tab's that. Now I got to go to this one. And then I just kind of lose steam on the process and then I start gaming. Rocket Money helps me short circuit that. And for my benefit, Rocket Money helps you cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. Rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. Save up to $740 a year with which members are using with all their premium features over at rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. All right, let's jump back into this conversation. Let's talk about why Minnesota, this is a must win for the Badgers. Really, really big game for Wisconsin coming up. Couple reasons. This is a stretch of basketball where Wisconsin is in one of those stretches where you have to be able to make hay against the teams that aren't very good. Minnesota is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. They've been struggling all year. They have not been able to get a lot going. They're coming off a really heartbreaking loss to Ohio State that they essentially gave away. There are tougher teams coming up on the schedule. We know this. You got Illinois, you have Michigan State, you have Purdue. Like there is really tough competition. Oregon's another one that looks really good. Like there's some really tough competition coming up on the schedule. You've already dropped a couple Big Ten games. You have a little bit of momentum now. You have to beat Minnesota. It is essential this year for Wisconsin to make hay against the teams that aren't very good. And Wisconsin's got a lot of momentum. One of the big reasons this is so important is if you look back to last year, what was like the turning point of that season? I mean, maybe it's the Nebraska loss, but you look back at that Michigan loss. You look back at a loss that there's no way it should have happened. That Michigan team was terrible. You can't have that moment this year. And losing to Minnesota would be a Michigan moment this year. You can't have it. Let's look at Minnesota a little bit and get into a couple keys to this game. The first one is let's talk about their star, Dawson Garcia. How are the Badgers going to guard him? What does he bring to the table? Dawson Garcia on the year averaging 18.2 and 7 rebounds on efficient shooting. Bigger guy. He's a forward. If you haven't, a lot of Badger fans are familiar with Dawson Garcia's game. He's been around for a while. But if you haven't seen him, he's kind of a stretch four. Definitely that prototypical modern basketball guy. Basketball wing. He'll step out, shoot threes. He likes to get to the rim. He likes to hang around the rim. Athletic, long-limbed. Can put the ball on the deck. Good rebounder, but it's more situational. A little more. He's not going to go in there and really carve out space. He's more slashing in with his length and his athleticism. I think the Badgers, if you're looking at this game, it's shut down Dawson Garcia, and then you're okay. And who do you do that with? I think it's Tanjay. If you look at matchups, Dawson Garcia is not a big guy. He wants to kind of play finesse basketball a little bit. There's not a great matchup on this roster for him. The matchup would have been Tyler Wall. Tyler Wall is the perfect matchup for Dawson Garcia. A little bigger, defensive focused, quick enough on the perimeter, but strong enough in the paint. The Badgers don't really have that guy this year. Maybe it's Carter Gilmore coming off the bench, but in the starting lineup, I think if you put Winter on Dawson Garcia, which you could, because Minnesota doesn't play a big lineup, I think you might have some issues on the perimeter with foot speed. Dawson Garcia is going to drive him a little bit. Now, I think Winter can recover, use his length, maybe alter shots, but I think the best matchup is probably John Tanjay, and then you try to fit it in around him. So Tanjay can crowd him on the perimeter. He's a man. Like he's a college basketball man. He's been around for a while. He's well built. He's physical. He's tough. Not the quickest guy, but that actually kind of plays up in this matchup if he's guarding Dawson Garcia, because Dawson Garcia is more of a long strider. He's not a footstep guy. So I think Tanjay can guard him. That way you can get him on the perimeter. If you put Winter on him, you're probably going to end up leaving a little space, and Dawson's going to take some shots. So I think you guard Dawson Garcia, and then you kind of fill in around that. A couple keys to this game. The first one is you got to start early. Again, don't let a bad team hang around. This start like you did in several games this year. Start like you did in Arizona. Start like you did in the Butler game. Start like you did in the Detroit Mercy game. Right? Start quickly. Get out fast. Early in the season, the Badgers had a penchant for not getting out the gates very quickly. Don't let a bad team hang around. I think that's the first key to this game. You're coming off a good win on the road against Rutgers. Start early, kind of get the environment going, hit a couple shots, put the pressure on Minnesota. And I think I think they're kind of a house of cards, right? If you kick that door in, I think it's going to collapse. Second key, you got to control the glass and the turnovers. This is not a great rebounding team in Minnesota. This is not a team that's going to punish you in the glass. This is not a team that Wisconsin should struggle with physically. There are several of those on the roster. We talked about it. It happened in the Michigan game, right? It happened in the Illinois game where Wisconsin got beaten up on the glass. This is not that game. The Badgers should be able to turn the table there. They should be able to win the battle on the glass. Big game from Stephen Crowell, right? We highlighted it in a previous show. The last 4 games from Stephen Crowell, the Badgers big man, it's like 16.1 per game, 6.5 rebounds, shooting 80-something percent, 70-something percent. He's been incredible the last 4 games. Ever since Greg Gard got on Stephen Crowell, he's been phenomenally good, phenomenally efficient. I would say he's playing at about the peak of what you can expect from him, because you still can't expect 18 and 12 from him, because that's just not who he is. But if he gives you 16 and 7 on efficiency, 16 and 6 on efficiency, he's playing near Stephen Crowell peak. It's almost like your lawnmower, right? If you're out on your riding lawnmower, your peak miles per hour might be like 6.4. I don't know anything about riding lawnmowers, but maybe that's as fast as it can go. I think Stephen Crowell's peak miles per hour is whatever, and we're very close to his peak right now with these last 4 games. There's not a lot of more ceiling in him, but if he gives you this every game, it's great. And this is the type of matchup he should be able to exploit. This is the type of matchup that he should be able to punish a little bit, because Minnesota isn't big and physical on the inside. They don't have a bunch of guys that are going to really crash the glass, a bunch of big athletic 4s and 5s who can clear out space. So big game from Stephen Crowell is part of this. Last game against Rutgers, we saw the turnovers were a big issue. There were 16 of them. They led to a lot of fast break points, which leads to my next one. Minnesota's not very good this year. They're not very good in a lot of ways. They're not very good on the glass. They're not very efficient shooting the ball. They don't get a bunch of shots up. They're 28th percentile in overall offensive efficiency when you look at points per play. So they're a bad team across the board, almost from a metric standpoint. But one area where they're really good is transition. They are good at getting out and pushing the ball. Upper 90th percentile in transition offense. So if they can create turnovers, if they can generate second chance off long rebounds, if they can get moving and get running, that's the spot where they could give you trouble. What did we see against Rutgers? We saw turnovers leading to fast break opportunities. Again, Rutgers in the first half had 8 or 10 points just off turnovers. Just off turnover, lead to fast break, open 3. Turnover, lead to fast break, layup. You have to control that. You're not going to have no turnovers, but get back to the 8 to 10 range. 16 would be unacceptable. And 16, if you have 16, Minnesota might take this game, or at least be in it, because that's their path to victory here. Create turnovers, create some havoc, and then get out and run, which is the one spot where their offense has been successful. So you really have to control those turnovers that you had, get somebody back, get the defense back, sprint back in transition, find shooters. And then if you can get to that point where Minnesota has to pull it back out, they have to get into their sets, they have to run the clock, they're not very good. And then I think you could smother them. I think you can kick the chair out and you can really put them on the floor. But you got to get to that point, which means you got to control the turnovers. You got to clean up the glass. You got to play a little bully ball and show that you're the better team. And if you do that and just lean on them, I think you're going to push them over in this contest. Last comment here is, I think you limit Dawson Garcia to the perimeter if you can. Because here's where guys like Garcia, I think in particular, are really dangerous. It's if they're doing everything. He absolutely has the ability to bury the 3. He'll jab step you. If you give him space, he'll take it. And he's certainly capable of hitting that shot. But he's also capable of jab step, pump fake, 2 dribbles. Now he's in the middle of your paint. You're collapsing. Then he's kicking out to shooters. Minnesota's not a great shooting team, but they will take some advantage of open shots. That's where you can't have it. I think you got to, if you're going to beat us, Dawson Garcia, you're going to beat us by hitting like 9 threes. You're not going to beat us by driving the paint, getting to the free throw line. He gets to the line quite a bit because he gets people in the air on the pump fake, because they over close out, because they try to take away his 3. Don't do that. Just say, if you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us by banging like 9 threes. You got to go Steph Curry to beat us, because we're not going to let you get in the paint. We're not going to let you wheel and deal. We're not going to let you get to the free throw line 7, 8, 9 times. We're going to put a body on you in glass. I think that's how you beat this team, right? You control the glass, big Stephen Crowell game, limit transition opportunities for Minnesota, which means you're not turning the ball over, which you did too much against Rutgers. And then you're keeping Dawson Garcia on the perimeter. Make him just a jump shooter. And if that means you play winter on him and play just a half step off until he hits 2 or 3 of them, I wouldn't even adjust. You got to contest. I'm not saying give him open shots. You contest, but you don't over contest. You don't close out like it's Reggie Miller. You make him hit a couple shots with a hand in the face, and you don't let him getting into the paint, because that gets him going, unfortunately. And that's how I beat Minnesota. And that's how I would attack this Minnesota game. Again, must win for the Badgers. This is one of the easiest games left on the schedule, maybe the easiest game. You can't miss layups in the Big Ten, especially when you start the season off with 2 conference losses. You have to get the ones you need to get. This is one of those you need to get. So that's coming up tomorrow on for the Badgers basketball team. Let's talk about coming up. We'll take a quick break for our friends of the show, and then we're going to talk about Max Klesmits and who needs to step up with his injury. That could potentially be a big loss for the Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. As always, really do want to say thank you for tuning into Locked On Badgers. All right, let's talk Max Klesmits. So, update from Greg Gard. Obviously, towards the end of the Rutgers game, Max Klesmits had an injury. Again, I've said my piece on that. I felt like that was kind of a borderline dirty play from the Rutgers defender closing out after the whistle, kind of putting the foot underneath there. But it is what it is. He sprained his ankle. There's nothing that we can do to go back and relitigate that. Greg Gard said kind of day to day. He was on a walking boot the other day during walk-arounds during practice. So I don't think he's going to play against Minnesota. Let's start there. I don't think Max Klesmits is going to play against Minnesota, and I don't think he should. I don't think Max should play against Minnesota because, again, this is it. I'm not going to minimize any game on the schedule, and I don't want to overlook any game on the schedule because you can lose any game. But this is a game that you should be able to win without Max Klesmits. And I don't want to risk him re-injuring that ankle with a ton of meat left on the schedule because ankles are tricky. We all know this. I mean, Greg Gard knows this too. We all know this. Even if he's 90%, sit just for a few more days, get a little bit more rest. If you were in a walking boot yesterday, I don't want you playing the next day in a Big Ten game, especially when I think we can beat Minnesota without you. So I would start there. What are you losing with Max Klesmits if he's not playing? Well, here's the numbers. You're losing 30% or 30 minutes per game. You're losing 10.5 points per game, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, and 6.5 threes per game. That last number I want to start with because that's important. I know Max Klesmits hasn't shot well this year, but he's still shooting on volume and he's still generating gravity. Teams are still closing out on him like he's a shooter. So you do need to replace some of that volume shooting that he's given you, and you do need to replace some of the spacing that he's given you. I would say this. With the 30 minutes, I think you just bump Klesmits up to start with. Kamari McGee to start with. He's a backup point guard. I think you take him from about the 20 minutes that he's getting now, 21 minutes that he's getting now. I think he goes up to about 32. So I think you give him 10, 11, 12 more minutes. I think he could probably play 32, 33, 34 if you needed him. I mean, that's probably about as much as you want to push it because he's never pulled those minutes at Wisconsin. But he's an upperclassman. He's fresh. He's been coming off the bench. He hasn't been playing a ton of minutes. I think you give him 30, 32 minutes. I think you go to Cam Hunter. I think it's Cam Hunter time. If he's healthy, he's ready to go. We saw him come in the Rutgers game or the Iowa game. Sorry. We saw him come in at the end of the Iowa game, hit a 3. I think you bring him in and see if he can give you 10, 11, 12 minutes. And right there, you're pretty close to making up the minutes for Max Klesmits between McGee and Cam Hunter. And I'd be really excited to see what Cam Hunter could potentially give you on this because that was a player that coming in we thought could factor into the point guard rotation. He does have some shooting ability. He's got some unique size. So let's say Hunter goes up to about 30, 32 minutes, which, by the way, that's been one of our more efficient offensive players. I'm actually kind of excited to see what he looks like with 30, 32 minutes. That could be pretty fun, quite frankly. I don't know, the efficiency will fall off the more minutes you get. It's unfair to expect somebody to continue shooting and playing at the level they are with a higher workload and a higher usage rate, but I'm excited to see what he'll do with the more minutes. Cam Hunter gets 10, 11, 12, a really big opportunity for him to get some quality film in moments that matter. And then I think for the extra 8 minutes or so you got to make up, you just kind of give it more to Blackwell and Tanjay running a lineup with some combination of Winter, Crowell, Gilmore, Janicki, Amos, some combination of that grouping, right? So maybe it's a few more minutes of the lineup with Tanjay, Blackwell, Gilmore, Winter, and Crowell. And then a few more minutes of the lineup of Tanjay, Blackwell, Janicki, Winter, and Amos. Something like that. So I think there's options here. Now, if you lost another guy, then you really start to get hurt. But I think in the short term, which this is a short-term thing, Greg Gard mentioned day-to-day, I think in the short term, you're okay because you can slot Hunter in for a few minutes. You are bringing in a guy who you were expecting to be in that rotation most likely anyway. And then McGee just takes a bigger role. I think it's fine. I don't think long-term it's good if Klesmits out by any stretch because there's things he brings to this team from an assist standpoint that I don't know if Hunter's replicating. And there's toughness that he brings to this team. And I still think the shooting that he's had historically in his career is there. Even though he's slumped this year a little bit, I think that shooting is going to be important for the Badgers down the stretch. I think his defense is important for the Badgers down the stretch. He's also a heart guy, a culture guy, a hustle guy. I think all that's really important. So this isn't me saying that the Badgers are better without him by any stretch. I don't think so. But I think in the short term, they're well equipped to weather this, especially with a team like Minnesota on deck, where McGee more minutes, I think they're fine. Hunter a few more minutes. I'm actually really excited to see how Hunter can work in with some of these starting combos. And again, very excited to see Kamari McGee with a bigger workload. That could be something that's really, really fun and enjoyable to check out. Anyway, thank you guys so much, guys and gals, so much for tuning into Locked On Badgers. Really do appreciate it as always. Today's episode, or when you're done, you're making Locked On Badgers your first listen. Go check out Locked On Big Ten for your second listen of the day. That's the Locked On Big Ten podcast. All the biggest stories in the conference. Obviously, college football playoffs are going on. Go check out Craig Sheeman over at Locked On Big Ten for your next listen on Wisconsin as always, and we will talk later.